The blood-red horizon swallowed the last sliver of sunlight as Sarah Dempsey clutched her swollen belly and staggered across the dusty main street of Timberline, Colorado. The year was 1878, and the mining town that had once promised prosperity now threatened to become her grave. 3 days without food had left her dizzy, desperate, and dangerously close to collapse. Her husband's face haunted her, still his boyish smile frozen in death after the mine collapse 6 weeks prior. With no family, no money, and a child growing inside her, Sarah had traveled west on rumors of work, only to find Timberline as unwelcoming as the jagged mountains that surrounded it. The aroma of fresh bread stopped her in her tracks. Outside Emmett's General Store, a tall man in a weather-worn Stetson was loading supplies onto a wagon. His shoulders were broad beneath a faded blue shirt, his movements precise and strong. A rancher, she guessed, or perhaps a cowboy passing through. Hunger drove her forward. Pride had abandoned her miles ago. "I'll work for bread," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible above the evening breeze. She steadied herself against a hitching post, willing her legs not to buckle. The man turned, revealing a face tanned by sun and weathered by wind. His eyes, sharp and blue as a mountain lake, widened at the sight of her, clearly pregnant, obviously starving. "You'll eat beside me forever," he said without hesitation, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to warm the cooling air. Then, as if realizing the forwardness of his words, he added more softly, "Madam, no one starves around Samuel Eastwood, not while I draw breath." Samuel helped Sarah onto the wagon seat with gentle hands that belied his strength. He wrapped a woolen blanket around her shoulders and pressed a chunk of bread into her trembling fingers. "Small bites now," he cautioned. "Too much too fast will make you sick." Sarah nodded, forcing herself to nibble rather than devour. "I'm Sarah," she managed between careful bites. "Sarah Dempsey. Samuel Eastwood, most folks call me Sam." He climbed up beside her and took the reins. "I've got a ranch about 10 miles north. Nothing fancy, but there's shelter, food, and work if you're willing." "I am," Sarah said, straightening her back despite her exhaustion. "I won't be a burden, Mr. Eastwood. I can cook, clean, so Sam," he corrected. "And there'll be time for all that once you've rested." His eyes flickered to her belly. "Both of you." The wagon lurched forward, carrying Sarah away from Timberline's indifference and toward an uncertain future with a stranger whose kindness seemed almost unreal after weeks of rejection and fear. As they traveled through the gathering darkness, Samuel spoke of his ranch, 500 acres carved from wilderness, a modest herd of cattle, a vegetable garden, and chickens that produced more eggs than one man could eat. He had built it all himself over the past 3 years, he explained, after returning from the war with dreams of peace and open skies. "What brought you to Timberline?" he asked eventually, his voice gentle. Sarah told him about her husband, Thomas, and the promise of mining work that had lured them west from Pennsylvania. She described the mine collapse that had made her a widow, and how the company had evicted her from company housing with nothing but Thomas's last pay envelope. "I thought I could find work in another town," she said, her hand resting on her belly. "But no one wants to hire a woman in my condition." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Their loss," he said simply. The moon was high when they reached the ranch, a collection of sturdy buildings nestled in a valley protected by pine-covered ridges. The main house was modest but well-built, with a wide porch and windows that gleamed silver in the moonlight. "You'll take my room tonight," Samuel said as he helped her down from the wagon. "I'll bunk in the storeroom." Too exhausted to protest, Sarah allowed him to lead her inside. The house was surprisingly tidy for a bachelor's dwelling, simple furniture, worn but clean, and a stone fireplace that dominated one wall of the main room. Samuel showed her to a bedroom with a 4-poster bed covered in a patchwork quilt. "Rest as long as you need," he said, placing her small carpet bag beside the bed. "There's water in the pitcher if you want to wash. I'll have breakfast ready when you wake." When Sarah woke the next morning, sunlight streamed through curtains she didn't recognize. For a moment, panic seized her, then memory returned. The cowboy, the offer of food and shelter, the long ride to this ranch, the smell of coffee and frying bacon drew her from the bed. She smoothed her wrinkled dress as best she could and ventured out to find Samuel at the cook stove, his sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. "Good morning," he said, glancing up with a smile that transformed his weathered face. "Hungry." "Starving," she admitted, returning his smile with a tentative one of her own. Over a breakfast of bacon, eggs, and Jonna cakes dripping with honey, Samuel outlined his proposal. "I need help around here cooking, mending, garden work. Nothing too strenuous in your condition. In exchange, you get room, board, and wages." "Wages?" Sarah's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "But the food and shelter is what any decent person would offer," he finished firmly. "Work deserves pay. We'll call it $15 a month to start, plus everything you need for the baby when it comes." Tears stung Sarah's eyes before she could blink them back. "Why are you doing this?" Samuel was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was low and rough with emotion. "I know what it's like to be alone in the world, Mrs. Dempsey. No one should face that, especially not when they're carrying new life." "It's Sarah," she said softly. "Just Sarah now." The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Sarah took over the cooking and mending, slowly regaining her strength as her body received proper nourishment. Samuel worked from dawn until dusk, tending cattle, repairing fences, and preparing for the coming winter. In the evenings, they sat on the porch if the weather was fair, or by the fire if it wasn't, talking until the kerosene lamp burned low. Samuel spoke of his childhood in Missouri, his time fighting for the Union, and his dream of building something lasting in the Colorado wilderness. Sarah shared stories of her life in Pennsylvania, her brief happy marriage to Thomas, and her hopes for her child. "Boy or girl, what do you wish for?" Samuel asked one evening as September cooled toward October. Sarah considered the question, her hand resting on her ever-growing belly. "Healthy," she said first, then added, "and brave. The world isn't always kind." "No," Samuel agreed, his eyes reflecting the firelight, "but there's kindness in it still." As her pregnancy advanced, Sarah found herself watching Samuel when he didn't notice the careful way he handled tools, the gentleness he showed to animals, the quiet competence that defined everything he did. He was not a handsome man in the conventional sense, with his broken nose and the scar that cut through his right eyebrow, but there was something about the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled that made her heart beat faster. It confused her, this growing attraction. Thomas had been dead barely 3 months. Was it disloyal to feel this pull toward another man? Or was it simply her vulnerable state, making her attach too much importance to kindness shown when she needed it most? For his part, Samuel kept a respectful distance, never crossing the invisible line between employer and employee, though Sarah sometimes caught him looking at her with an expression that made her wonder if he felt the same confusion. October brought the first snow and a visit from Doc Wilson, the closest physician who lived in a settlement 15 miles away. Samuel had insisted on having him check on Sarah and the baby. "Everything looks fine," the elderly doctor pronounced after his examination. "Baby's positioned well, good strong heartbeat. You're doing an excellent job taking care of yourself, Mrs. Dempsey." "Thanks to Mr. Eastwood," Sarah said, glancing at Samuel, who had waited anxiously outside during the examination. "Sam's a good man," Doc Wilson agreed, packing his instruments. "Best neighbor anyone could ask for." He hesitated, then added, "Though folks do wonder why he keeps to himself so much." Later, after the doctor had gone, Sarah found Samuel in the barn, brushing down his mare with long, methodical strokes. "The doctor says everything's fine," she told him, wrapping her shawl tighter against the chill. "He thinks late November, maybe early December for the baby." Samuel nodded, relief evident in his face. "Good, that's good. He also said people wonder why you keep to yourself." The words came out before she could reconsider them, his hand stilled on the mare's flank. "People always wonder about what they don't understand." "And what don't they understand about you?" Samuel resumed brushing, his movements slightly more forceful. "That some men prefer quiet to gossip. That some scars don't show on the outside." "War scars?" Sarah asked softly. He nodded once, sharply. "Among others." She wanted to press further but sensed his withdrawal. Instead, she changed the subject. "I was thinking of making apple pie for supper. There are still some good ones in the root cellar." The tension in his shoulders eased. "Sounds like heaven." As winter settled over the ranch, Sarah's body grew heavier and her movements slowed. Samuel took on more of the indoor chores without comment, hauling water for washing, keeping the woodbox filled, and even helping with meal preparation when her back ached too badly to stand for long. One evening, as the first December snow fell outside, Sarah sat by the fire attempting to darn one of Samuel's socks. Her clumsy efforts made her growl in frustration. "Here," Samuel said, setting aside the bridle he was mending. "Let me show you." He took the sock and needle, demonstrating a neat darning stitch with surprising dexterity. At Sarah's raised eyebrows, he chuckled. "Army teaches a man to be self-sufficient." "What else did the army teach you?" she asked, watching his hands work. His smile faded slightly. "To value peace. To recognize the worth of a human life." He tied off the thread and passed the mended sock back to her. "And to seize whatever moments of joy come your way, because tomorrow isn't promised to anyone." Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and Sarah felt a jolt of awareness that had nothing to do with her pregnancy and everything to do with the man sitting across from her, a man who had shown her nothing but respect and kindness for months, without asking anything in return. "Samuel," she began, not sure what she wanted to say, only knowing she needed to say something. A sharp pain cut off her words. She gasped, clutching her belly as warmth flooded between her thighs. "Sarah." Samuel was on his feet instantly, alarm sharpening his features. "The baby," she managed. "It's coming." The next hours passed in a blur of pain and fear. Samuel sent one of his ranch hands, a young man named Jeb who helped with the cattle, to fetch Doc Wilson, but the worsening storm made it clear the doctor wouldn't arrive in time. "You'll have to help me," Sarah told Samuel between contractions, gripping his hand with desperate strength. The color drained from his face. "Sarah, I don't know how, neither do I," she admitted, fear cracking her voice. "But this baby is coming with or without Dr. Wilson." Determination replaced fear in Samuel's eyes. "Tell me what you need." Samuel boiled water, gathered clean linens, and helped Sarah into the position she thought best based on what she'd heard from other women. When the contractions grew unbearable, he held her hand and spoke words of encouragement, his voice steady even when she screamed. After what seemed like eternity, Sarah gave a final push, and a tiny, indignant cry filled the room. Samuel's hands, which had fought in war and worked the land, now cradled new life with infinite tenderness. "A girl," he whispered, awe softening his weathered face as he wrapped the squalling infant in a clean cloth. "You have a daughter, Sarah." He placed the baby in Sarah's arms, and she looked down at the red, wrinkled face of her daughter. Love, fierce and overwhelming, surged through her. "Hello, Emma," she murmured, the name she and Thomas had chosen if the baby was a girl. "Welcome to the world." Samuel helped clean up, then left mother and child to rest while he waited outside for the doctor, who arrived shortly after dawn, haggard from fighting through the storm. "You did well," Doc Wilson told Samuel after examining both mother and baby. "Both are healthy as can be." The days following Emma's birth were a haze of exhaustion, joy, and adjustment. Samuel proved an unexpected source of support, seemingly undaunted by the messy realities of a newborn. He walked the floor with Emma when she was fussy, allowing Sarah precious hours of sleep, and tackled household chores without complaint. "You're good with her," Sarah observed one evening as Samuel gently rocked Emma, who had fallen asleep against his broad chest. "She makes it easy," he replied, his finger trapped in Emma's tiny fist. "She's a good judge of character." "Like her mother?" Sarah asked, surprising herself with the flirtatiousness in her tone. Samuel's eyes met hers, something unspoken passing between them. "I hope so." As Christmas approached, Sarah found herself reflecting on the dramatic changes the year had brought: widowhood, near starvation, rescue by a stranger who had become something much more, and now motherhood. Despite the losses, she felt a tentative happiness taking root. Samuel seemed to sense her reflective mood. On Christmas Eve, after Emma was asleep in the cradle he had crafted for her, he presented Sarah with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "It's not much," he said, uncharacteristically nervous, "but I wanted you to have something." Inside was a silver locket on a delicate chain. When Sarah opened it, she found a tiny lock of Emma's dark hair on one side, the other side was empty. "I thought," Samuel said hesitantly, "someday you might want to put a picture there of Emma, or—" He trailed off, then straightened his shoulders as if gathering courage, "or of someone else who matters to you." Sarah closed her hand around the locket, emotions tangling in her chest. Samuel, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he assured her quickly. It's just a token of, he stopped, visibly struggling for words, of my regard. The formality of the phrase made Sarah smile despite her confusion. Your regard, Samuel ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. I'm not good with words, Sarah, never have been. He took a deep breath. I care for you and for Emma, more than I should, perhaps, given the circumstances. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. The circumstances, you're still grieving Thomas. Emma's not yet a month old, I'm your employer. He listed each point like barriers between them. It wouldn't be right for me to speak of feelings when you're dependent on me. Is that how you see me? As dependent? Sarah asked, a spark of anger kindling within her. No, Samuel said quickly. You're the strongest woman I've ever known. But the situation, Sarah interrupted, is that we're two adults who have come to care for each other. Yes, I'm still grieving Thomas. I probably always will in some way, but my heart didn't die with him. She touched the locket. And this is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me. Hope flickered in Samuel's eyes. So you're not offended by your regard? Sarah smiled. No, Samuel, I'm honored by it. He moved closer cautiously, as if approaching a wild creature. And if that regard were to deepen into something more, I'd say, Sarah replied softly, that mine already has. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question rather than a demand. When they parted, Samuel rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if memorizing the moment. I never expected this, he whispered. When you appeared in Timberline that day, I only meant to help someone in need. And now, Sarah asked, he opened his eyes, blue and clear as summer sky. Now I can't imagine my life without you and Emma in it. Winter gradually yielded to spring, and with the warming days, Sarah and Samuel's relationship deepened. They moved carefully, mindful of Emma and the ghosts of the past that sometimes cast shadows between them. In March, Samuel rode to Denver on business, returning with a proper cradle for Emma and fabric for new curtains. As Sarah sorted through his purchases, she found a small book of poetry tucked among the practical items. What's this? She asked, holding up the volume of Wordsworth. Samuel actually blushed, the color stark against his tanned skin. Doc Wilson mentioned you like poetry, thought you might enjoy having some to read. The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought tears to Sarah's eyes. It wasn't the gift itself, but the evidence that Samuel listened, remembered, and acted on what mattered to her. That night after Emma was asleep, Sarah read aloud from the book while Samuel listened, his eyes half closed in appreciation. When she finished a poem about nature's healing power, he reached for her hand. Marry me, he said simply. Sarah's breath caught. Samuel, I know it hasn't been a year since Thomas died, he continued, his voice low and urgent. I know some might think it's too soon. But life is short, Sarah, and what we have, he squeezed her hand. I don't want to waste a day of it pretending we're just employer and housekeeper. Neither do I, Sarah admitted, but marriage is a big step. We've already taken most of the steps, Samuel pointed out. We live together, we're raising Emma together, we care for each other. His thumb traced circles on her palm. The only things missing are the promises and the name. Sarah considered his words. It was true that they had built a life together these past months, one that felt more solid and right than anything she had known before. And Emma deserved a father who chose her, who loved her as Samuel clearly did. Yes, she said finally, her heart lightening with the decision. Yes, I'll marry you. Samuel's smile was brilliant in the lamplight. He pulled her close, his kiss deeper and more certain than their first had been months ago. They married in April. A simple ceremony performed by the circuit preacher with Doc Wilson and a few neighbors as witnesses. Emma, now 4 months old, gurgled happily in the arms of Mrs. Peterson, a rancher's wife who had befriended Sarah. Samuel had worried that some might judge Sarah harshly for remarrying so soon after widowhood, but the small community seemed to understand that life on the frontier demanded practicality. A woman alone with a child faced nearly impossible odds. A marriage based on genuine affection was something to celebrate, not condemn. Their wedding night was both awkward and wonderful, two people who knew each other well in many ways, but were strangers in this most intimate act. Samuel was patient and gentle, and Sarah discovered passion she hadn't known herself capable of feeling. Afterward, lying in the darkness with her head on his chest, Sarah traced the scar that ran along his ribs, a souvenir from Shiloh he had told her once. "Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly needing to hear the words. Samuel's hand smoothed her hair. "Happier than I ever thought possible." He kissed the top of her head. "What about you? Any regrets?" Sarah thought about the long journey that had brought her here, the grief, the desperation, the moment of courage when she had approached a stranger and whispered her willingness to work for bread. "No regrets," she said firmly. "Only gratitude." Summer brought long, golden days filled with work and simple pleasures. Sarah and Samuel fell into the rhythms of married life as if they had been partners for years, rather than months. Emma grew sturdy and strong, her personality emerging stubborn like her mother, Samuel claimed, with a smile that could melt the hardest heart. In July, Sarah received a letter from her cousin in Pennsylvania, the first contact with her former life, since she had headed west with Thomas more than a year before. The letter contained family news, expressions of sympathy for Thomas's death, and a carefully worded inquiry about her current circumstances. "Will you write back?" Samuel asked when she shared the contents with him. Sarah nodded. "I'll tell them about Emma and you," she smiled. "They'll be shocked I remarried so quickly. Do you care what they think?" His tone was casual, but Sarah caught the hint of concern beneath it. "No," she said honestly. "They weren't there when I needed help. You were." She leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "Besides, they're 3,000 miles away. Their opinions can't touch us here." As autumn painted the aspen groves gold and crimson, Sarah realized she was pregnant again. She waited until she was certain before telling Samuel, unsure how he would receive the news of another mouth to feed so soon. She needn't have worried. His face lit with joy when she told him, and he lifted her off her feet in an exuberant embrace that made Emma clap her hands in delight from where she sat on a quilt nearby. "Another baby," he marveled, his hand gentle on Sarah's still flat stomach. "Our baby." The simple phrase "our baby" brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Emma would always be a connection to Thomas, a reminder of her first love. This new child would be different, a physical manifestation of what she and Samuel had built together. Winter settled over the ranch again, harsher than the previous year. Blizzards isolated them for weeks at a time, but the house was warm, the pantry well stocked, and their small family content in their cocoon of domesticity. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year since Samuel had given Sarah the locket, he presented her with another gift, a wooden picture frame containing a sketch of Emma, executed with surprising skill. "I didn't know you could draw," Sarah said, admiring the likeness. Samuel shrugged, embarrassed by her praise. "Just something I picked up during the war, helps pass the time during long watches. It's beautiful." Sarah touched the glass protecting the drawing. "When did you find time to do this?" "While you were napping with Emma," he admitted. "I've been working on it for weeks." Sarah's gift to him was more practical, a new wool coat to replace his threadbare one, but the real present was the news she had been saving. "Doc Wilson confirmed it yesterday when he stopped by," she told Samuel as they sat by the fire after Emma was asleep. "Twins?" Samuel's jaw dropped. "Twins, are you certain?" Sarah nodded, laughing at his stunned expression. "He says I'm bigger than I should be at this stage, and he heard 2 distinct heartbeats." "Twins," Samuel repeated, wonder replacing shock. He placed his hand on her rounded belly. "2 babies. Are you disappointed?" Sarah asked, suddenly anxious. "It will be a lot of work with Emma still so young." "Disappointed?" Samuel shook his head emphatically. "Sarah, you've given me more than I ever dreamed possible, a family, love." His voice roughened with emotion. "How could I be anything but grateful?" Spring arrived with its promise of renewal, and with it came Samuel and Sarah's twin sons, sturdy boys with their father's blue eyes and their mother's determined chin. They named them William and James, after Samuel's father and brother, both lost during the war. Emma, now toddling and babbling a mixture of real words and her own language, approached her baby brothers with solemn curiosity, eventually declaring them nice in her limited vocabulary. As Sarah watched Samuel with their children, gentle with Emma, confident with the twins, she marveled at how completely her life had transformed in less than 2 years. From the brink of starvation to abundance, from desperate loneliness to being surrounded by love. One evening in June, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of amber and rose, Samuel reached for her hand. "Remember what I said that first day in Timberline?" he asked. Sarah smiled, the memory vivid despite the passage of time. "You said I'd eat beside you forever." "Best promise I ever made," Samuel replied, squeezing her fingers. Though I had no idea then just how much it would come to mean. Inside the house, one of the twins began to cry, and Emma's voice rose in what was either sympathy or competition. Sarah laughed, rising to attend to their children. "Forever is turning out to be quite an adventure," she said, leaning down to kiss him before heading inside. Samuel caught her hand once more, his eyes reflecting the last light of day. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Sarah smiled, knowing it was true. Their life wasn't perfect. It held challenges, hard work, and the ordinary frustrations of any marriage, but it was rich with love freely given and gratefully received. And it had all begun with 7 words spoken by a desperate woman and answered by a compassionate man. "I'll work for bread. You'll eat beside me forever." Words that had become a promise kept day by day, season by season, heart by heart.